I think I wanted to show off, to be honest with you. If this is sport, I'm getting out of this. I would have been called up for Wales had it not been for a total and utter lack of ability. I woke up the next morning and I thought, I can't open my eyes. There was about 35 cats there just looking at that. Dog, shit, man. The big doo-doo judge. Don't open these ever, I said. They'd be worth a lot of money when I'm dead. You must have balls of steel. It's tenacity you need in this game more than anything.
Right, welcome to Jonathan X today. I've got a really special guest today. Let me just give him a build-up. Star Wars, Afterlife, Pirates of the Caribbean, Stella, right? So, actor, writer, and Merthyr's biggest export, Steve Speirs. Am I right?
Well, I'm impressed and I've heard what I've done. I've got to say, lovely build-up, Jeff.
It is a build-up. I try and build a good guest up because we've had a lot of variety and it's brilliant.
Yeah. I look back sometimes at all the things, the CV and that, and you know, the one thing I say I've got is stay in power, right? You know, you get certain people in my industry that are like, you know, they become massive stars very quickly, and you don't see them. They're there for about 4 or 5 years and they're in everything, and you don't see them. And I always think it's like, you know, like yachts, very pretty yachts you can see at sea with big yellow sails and big red sails, and they're there and they catch your eye and then they're gone. And I'm like one of those big old liners. I just keep going.
I was going to say tugboat.
How long did this thing last?
Right, thank you for coming.
Big old liners, it just keeps going.
How long have you been? How long is from start to finish? How long have you been going now?
Well,
going strong.
I started when I was, I suppose, professionally at 21. And I've been doing it to my age now, so for 20 years now.
Oh, that's good going. Good going. in a really kind of cutthroat industry.
40 years now. 40 years.
In a cutthroat industry as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know.
Yeah,
so let's start. I did say Merthyr. That's where you born and bred. Still there. Everything.
Well, I come from the Merthyr Valley, a village called Troedrew.
Yes.
And all my family were in Merthyr, up in the Gurness and Dowlais and Pendarren and all in the valley and that. And a lot of them still are, you know, so I do get to go up there. But I left Wales when I was when I went to university, and after that I lived in London, and I lived in Brighton, and then I moved back to Wales. And in fact, I moved. It was really weird. This was because I'd lived in the southeast for so long, and especially when I was in Brighton, I sort of thought that, you know, I'd be working. I thought, oh, I'm going back home. And then I was leaving Wales one day, and I'd been working with Nige on a thing we did called Nige.
Nigel Owens.
With Nigel Owens, right? It was called Nige, and it was a build-up to the Six Nations about 8-9 years ago. And the idea was that my county would be his agent and trying to get him to do various things.
Oh, I remember seeing that.
Do you remember it?
Yeah.
And I was leaving, I was on the M4, and I said, this weird feeling that I was leaving home rather than, do you know what I mean? It was odd, it was like a Damascus. And I got back and I said to my wife, my wife at the time, I said, I want to go to Wales. We've all been there. I've been there a few more than others, that's trouble. I said, I just want to move back to Wales. I just had this instinct. I wanted to get back to the ranch. And I did, and it's great. And I live in Cardiff now, and it's lovely.
It's good people in Merthyr.
I
love it. I've been up there. They're brilliant people.
They're good laugh, innit?
They have a bad rap sometimes, the place does, you know. But let me tell you, when people go there, they love it. Because the people. Fantastic. And it's like anything. I know. Great. Look at the weather we just had in January, right? Yeah. If you know, people say, why do you stay here? One reason. The people. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's the only reason.
Yeah.
So,
and you know, when I loved it. I was up there filming last year, and it was really nice to be able to do a show that was promoting Merthyr in a nice way. On that.
It was.
And you know, I mean, the laugh I had.
Oh, they're so funny.
They are great.
They are so fun. I knew a guy, Peter Morgan. Remember Peter Morgan?
Yeah.
What a character he is.
Yeah.
Right, let's go back to the start. So what did you want to be when you were growing up? Because you know, I suppose Merthyr, you wouldn't say, well, I'm not going to be an actor.
Well, no, exactly. I mean, I said to my father, I don't think I wanted to be an actor. I know I wanted to entertain, right?
Okay.
I know I wanted to be in front of people. I think I wanted to show off, to be honest.
Did you know that from an early age, from being in school?
Straight away, I remember when I was about 3 years old, we used to go on family holidays to Weymouth, and there was a Punch and Judy box there. And if anybody ever said, "Where's Steve?" They look on the beach, "Where's Steve?" I'd be sat in front of this Punch and Judy box like that. And my father used to give me 2 pence, say, "Show me on now in a bit." And I'd be there. I'd be there for the 10 o'clock show, 12 o'clock show, 2 o'clock show. I'd just be sat there. And my grandfather could say I was obsessed with these puppets. He made me a puppet box. And I used to go and do kids' parties up in the valleys. My father used to charge them as well. I was only about 9 or 10. He was an entrepreneur boy. And it's Merthyr, isn't it? We know how to make a few bob.
Exactly.
So when I was fleecing these kids, I was doing these little shows about 9 years old. And then I loved light entertainment at the time. I loved, the people that were on there that I found very entertaining, like Morecambe and Wise or Tommy Cooper, Les Dawson, Dave
Mike
Allen.
Yarwood
Was a fun, Dave Allen. And then later, Billy
all these
Connolly.
youngsters now will have no idea.
No idea
You've
what
got to
we're
look
talking
them all
about.
up on YouTube.
Yeah. Billy Connolly and that. And I wanted to do, that's what I really wanted to do. And I remember saying to my dad, I want to leave and do this. He said, no, I think you need to think about that. And he had an apprenticeship lined up for me at Hoover's. So I then started doing some plays and things with a local teacher, and she used to take me over to the Aberdare, to the Coliseum. And I suddenly thought, actually, this is what I want to do. And then I went down to Loughborough University, which was great because there was a load of rugby there. Yeah. And I did my degree in drama, which is about as useful as a 25-metre swimming badge, quite frankly.
But then again,
especially coming back to Merthyr.
But if you got drama, you got to make a call into drama because I suppose most of the time the drama would kind of be the same time as rugby. Did you have was you sporty growing up?
Well, I used to play cards behind the shed. I used to bunk off, play snooker on a Friday. I tell you what, when I was little in junior school, but the bottom is I wasn't little, right? I was always big. So I used to dread PT because it was the old style sport. Do you remember, right?
And,
remember the ladders would come out, the bars, and imagine me on a beam.
Murder ball.
The vaults, remember the vault? Yeah. I can't watch that film. Pirates.
Exactly.
And that film, The Wooden Horse, where they dig a tunnel, I can't watch that because all I can see is me sat on top of that. Listen now, as though I need encouragement, being slapped by a boat with a dap.
I know.
Because I couldn't get across it. That's encouragement.
Up. No, I'm not even into drama.
Yeah, I tell you what, I thought, if this is sport, I'm getting out of this. But I do remember going to, when I went to secondary school then in Merthyr, and suddenly, from being big, was suddenly... I found I fitted in for the first time.
Yeah.
I fitted into a sport, and rugby started, and I used to shot put for the school in the summer and play rugby for them in the winter.
What position were you?
Fly off.
You look nice hands. Yeah. Soft hands.
Lovely hands. That's the only part of you is fly off. I played second row when I was in Merthyr, and then with Merthyr Youth I played second row. And then when I went to Loughborough, they were monsters. You know what I mean? They were like.
Serious.
John Morrison went on to play for Bath. He was huge. John Wells, who went on to play for Leicester. They were big boy. Andy Robinson, who went on to become Andy Robinson. And so I propped them because all the locks were huge.
Against all of them.
They were
huge. They were handfuls. So, So obviously you realised quickly that sport wasn't your bag, so you went into the acting.
Well, no, I tell you what did happen. I wasn't. Hang on now, you just dismissed my rugby playing career and flipped on to your next question, Jeff. I would have been called up for Wales had it not been for a total and utter lack of ability.
Be careful, I maybe called up next week. The way we're going, me and you.
That's controversial. I tell you what, we've got 2 good knees between us.
Yeah.
I reckon we'd make 1 player.
Yeah, we'd be a nightmare, wouldn't we? I don't know.
I tell you why I stopped playing rugby eventually, and I loved it, is that I had got an agent, and I was going for castings, and they said, look, we're getting phone calls from these casting directors because they said you're turning up looking like you've been in a car crash. You know?
Oh, I know, yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? But you forget, you
stop
get marked. I thought,
know.
oh, God.
So you had to stop then.
So I stopped then.
So when did your interest in acting begin? And you know, what was your first audition like? That must be
God.
so nerve-wracking.
Well, it was. I mean, so when I started to go around to do plays then, amateur dramatic stuff in the valleys, the course that you were meant to take was to go to drama school,
Yeah.
you know. But I didn't get into one of them. I did not get into one. I remember going for I remember this was the sort of like early 80s now, so it was the days of fame and leg warmers and leotards. I mean, imagine being, gee, no, I don't know. You've just gone off into a very
Dark
place.
Dark place.
You won't sleep now. I'm having nightmares about Gwyard and Oliver running towards us on Sunday, and you're having nightmares about me in a leotard.
I am.
So I went to audition at drama school in London, Rose Bruford, and it was the only one audition I did. And my father said to me, he said, we're going to go stay there. He said, I got a cousin, and he lives just outside of London. He said, by the flyover there as you go in. So I said, okay, great. And, I look back at it, and it's ridiculous, really, because my father, my uncle, and they treated like a rugby trip. It was my first audition for drama school. They got about 6 of them in the car now, 6
You
of
go
them.
now, we'll have a
No,
we'll have some crack.
they're all lined up with the beers and that. Anyway, we went out the night in London, got drunk, and then when we got back, they said there was a building work being done. There wasn't one side of the house. There was a wall gone and like plastic up and that. And they said, "Oh, you're in the caravan." So I went to this car, and it was dark. And they said, "Oh, there's no lights here. There's no electricity." So I'm going like this now, get in this caravan. Anyway, but I woke up the next morning and I thought, I can't open my eyes.
Dust.
Anyway, I put the light on, and the caravan, there was about 35 cats there just looking at that. I'm allergic to cats, right? My eyes now had come up like I'd just gone 15 rounds with Ali, right? I'm like that now. I go, Dad. So anyway, so he said, "No, you'll be fine. Yeah, wash it off." He said, "We're going to the pub." He said, "You're very good. You won't be." So I go into this audition, which is like Fame City, and they got their leg warmers and leotard. I got a Merthyr rugby kit on. My eyes are looking like I'd just been punched. I didn't make it through the first round. And I always thank my father for that. And because they turned my audition into a bloody rugby trip.
But there we are. The next question was, have you had a bad audition? So what's the strangest role you've gone for in an audition?
I mean, I've been for all sorts of things. I used to do a lot of commercials at one point in the 90s, and I think they were like the financial cornerstone of it's like we do. And there was one audition where I think it was for a Danish bacon, and I remember the advert really clearly, and the bloke's nose grew, and he sort of smelled this bacon.
All right.
All right, you know. I can't remember what the advert was for. I think it was bacon. And they put me on the skateboard and wanted to drag me towards this camera to see if and I said, "Well, that's not happening. I'm not doing that." But I did go up for Brigadoon, which was a musical in the West End, not having a West End singing voice at all. But I thought, I'll blag it, so I'll get through this. And I thought, that song's in my range. I mean, like, if you've got a gun, I'd be in the range.
Must be so frightening.
Oh, it's awful. Jeff, there was like West End, loads of people there, loads looking at you, and I started the song, and I realised I could feel about halfway through. I thought, this is out of my range now. This is well out of my range, and I'm asthmatic, so the tension's got to me. And I was singing. I remember it was from Les Miserables, Empty Chairs or Empty Tables. And I can hear him now. And I knew I was going to get to the panic hit me. I got my ventilator out. Turned around, started puffing on the ventilator. Can hear him now. Right. Anyway, didn't get it. So I mean, to be honest with you, it's been a shit show. My career, I've disastrous.
Right, before we go to the good stuff, you must look back now, right, and go, "Oh my God, look at those people now in the auditions. Look at me now. Look at me now."
Do you know what the thing is? My boy, who's an actor, and he's got a West End musical voice, and and he's trained. And he said, when I tell him this story, he goes, "So let me just go back on this." you knew you couldn't sing this song. I said, no, I knew that.
Brave.
And he said, and you knew you were going to fail. I said, yeah. He said, you must have balls of steel. Why did you go in there?
I know.
I said, because I'm a trier, and I'll try.
Because most people, right, will know their limitations, especially when you go into it on your own. You're gonna, you can't really hide, can you? You can't turn around and say, look,
No.
you hit that note for me.
Yeah.
So, looking back now, right, I remember, I was laughing so much. I think I watched Afterlife in one evening, right? Straight through, right?
Yeah.
So you worked many times with Ricky Davies, right? What is it like working, with him now?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that, part of the reason I broke through in a way was because of Ricky, because we did extras together, and then we did Cemetery Junction, and then I think Afterlife is such a brilliant show.
It's kind of very poignant for me, because I lost my wife from cancer, right? And you look at it, and it gives you memories, and and not good, and then good, and you just, but you laugh at it, because I was looking at it and going, you're either miserable, like, and then you just give up, or you just got to crack on, like. And in that show, I found it, it was just kind of a deep show, but I really enjoyed it.
Did you find that? Because I think the clever thing about it is that he's writing about something that is so
dark,
universal.
Yeah.
That the one thing we will all experience loss.
Yeah.
We will all experience grief.
Yeah.
And I think that, the fact that it touched you, everybody I speak to about that, and me myself, in losing family members and that, and what I love about his character is that, and his approach to grief is that there is no way or rhyme or reason, and he goes from not wanting to get out of bed to going, I don't give a fuck today, and do you know what I mean? And so all the sort of social parameters that you're brought up with, they go, because you are lost. You're literally lost, aren't you? You're totally lost.
And there's a girl in it, lose her hair and all. It's brilliant. I thought it was brilliant. I was gonna contact him, like, on DM him and all that. But it was just such a brilliant show. But always remember, right?
Oh, I've spoken to him. I said, Jiffy said you're a dick, Rick. And
well, next time we have a pint, right, I'll tell him he's a dick face to face. I'll come with you. I'll come with you. So, but on that show, I don't want to tell you. You played. You'll tell everyone you played a part of a guy that picked the dog shit up, didn't you? But tell it.
It's fucking time with a mouthful of water.
It's an important job. People should pick it up themselves, really, as a dog walker. But if you don't, it's a good job. Tell me that. What is it like working with him?
Well, he's great. I mean, we get on very well now because of the fact we've done a lot of work together. I mean, he seems to he uses the same people.
Yes.
There's a group of us that, and that's a trust thing, really.
Yeah, brilliant.
And he likes people who've got thick necks as well. I got a thick neck, see.
Why?
Not
why you got a thick neck. Why does he like people?
All those years in the leotard, wasn't it? What do you think? I had to look at something. No, he just likes people. You don't audition, he just measures your neck and you're in. You ever look at the actresses? The actresses got thick necks as well.
Oh, they're going to be so chuffed you said that. Let me tell you.
No, it's about trust, and the fact that when you're with him, so he'll just start riffing around the theme about the speeches that you're doing with him and the rest of it, and it's been able to take that. And but when I did Cemetery Junction, he sent me the script, and the character was called Speirs, and in extras they just called him Speirs, and then it came to Afterlife. So I play a character who, for 1 year, has mistakenly been posting his mail in a dog shit bin. Right? For a year, right? And so when he sent me the character to look at, he sent me the script. He said, what do you think of this script, Jenna? I said, it's lovely, Rick. I said, it's really great. I said, it's very funny. Yeah, it's fine. I thought you'd do it. I said, the only thing is, like, I said, he's called Speirs. I said, oh, Speirs, like, Yeah, well, that's your name. I said, I know, but I said, it'd be nice to have something on my CV, like, you know,
Yeah.
to say what the character's name is, rather than Speirs. He goes, no, let me have a think about it. So about 3 weeks later, the script came back, and my character's now called Dog Shit Man. Dog Shit Man.
Well, you know, there's only one of them.
Well, it's like Hamlet, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one Hamlet.
But you know, it's the trust that he has in you, right? And knows your character, knows. So I watch a lot of his ad-lib stuff, and you know the off cuts and what's made the thing. He's laughing and everyone's funny. What's it like working with it? Is he there and you ad-lib? Do you ad-lib and?
Well, people think that, but it's not, because the skill of it is to make it look like you're doing it for the first time. You know, there'd be things in rehearsal that would happen, and you go, I love that. So I'd start doing stuff. You go, great, we keep that bit in. Like when we were doing extras, there was something about my eyes with him being blind, and so that sort of creeps in. But you know that laugh he's got, which is like, it's a nightmare to cope with. It's like on absolute crack. A hyena on crack, right? And if you look at extras where I invite him out for dinner to go to watch We Will Rock You in the theatre, and if you look at that scene, there's very little two shots, because he wasn't in it. He'd just be pissing himself, and he'd go off next door then for somebody else, because you couldn't cope with the enjoyment that he had with it, and I had with it. And he's great. Yeah, I think that sort of certainly, you know, comedically, I suppose, I'll look back, put me on the map in terms of doing that, led to a lot of other stuff, like, you know. Yeah,
but like, you know, work with him, but you've also, you know, done a lot of work with your good friend Ruth. And I enjoyed that programme when you went to Porthcawl.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah, I enjoyed that as well.
Well, do you see that's lovely, because that came on the back of the Mirth one. So it was the, you know, Cyfarthfa Castle's 200 bicentenary, and the idea was I'd show Ruth around Merthyr, and it was fantastic. We had such a laugh.
Yeah, you can see her laugh on it.
Oh, we had a laugh.
You can see her laugh. So what's it? You know, you'd written Stella. What's it like? Yeah. What's it like working with her? What's the dynamic?
Right. Well, I mean, we've known each other for 35 years now, I think.
Stella.
Well, it started. I've probably worked with Ruth more than I've worked with anybody.
Have you?
Jeff. Yeah. I met Rob Brydon, when we were 16 in the youth theatre. And then I was introduced to Ruth, and we did a comedy sketch show called Except for Viewers in England, and a pilot called Throw Another Log on the Cottage. and then we, I mean, I'd done so much with it. We worked together at the National Theatre in Under Milkwood. We did a film called Baby Juice Express together, which is about a man who smuggles his sperm out of prison to impregnate his wife. I don't think it's on the A-level syllabus. In fact, I think you can get it on Amazon you can hire it for about 26 pence for a year. Biggest pile of shit I've ever been in my life, but there we are. And that wasn't because of Ruth. And we did so much together. And then the great thing came. I'd written the film, and so she knew I was writing, but we were all writing a load of our own stuff during the sketch show. And when Stella came up, she said, look, I've got this commission to write a big new series, and would you like to be one of the writers on it? And it was great. There were about 7 or 8 writers on it. And and I wrote a lot of, you know, I think I wrote about 10 episodes of it. And it was great.
Were a lot of the characters based on people you knew, or you just make them up?
The thing is that the characters and the story of that, from Stella's point of view, was created by Ruth and David Peat, who was the production team at the time. And so, for example, when he did the Tackers, then I originated those characters.
Yeah, okay.
So, but what you do is you'll bring in other characters that you write for. Then, like, you know, I remember bringing in Yanto, and also, you know, I tended to write a lot of the rugby episodes where we got Scott in, I mean, it was Dick the Kick's funeral was just fantastic.
Brilliant.
Because
it was brilliant.
You know, we got in Pricey and so many. There was Shane there and Charv and that.
I know.
And I remember they were all sitting down. We were going to block it, and where we were going to sit.
Because I was supposed to be on that as well.
But why didn't you come to
I
it?
think I was on holiday the week they were doing it. That's the reason I didn't come.
I was told you said the money wasn't right. But I mean, I don't know.
I'd do anything on telly, let me tell you.
I did it for a Twix on my bus fare home. Don't worry about that. No, but I tell you, all right, and let me just say this, because we're all going to where we're going to sit. And of course, Graham Price, he was like my hero when I was growing up as a kid. I'm going to be Big Graham. I'm going to be Big Graham. That's like it's in the shot. Price is there like that. And they go, I say, why didn't Graham say that line? Graham can say that line for me. Like any other actor, I have to drag the line out of my voice before I give him any of my lines. So you leave my lines alone. Pricey can do it. Starstruck.
Did he enjoy it?
Oh, he loved it. He didn't show it. Mind you, he doesn't show anything, does he?
Show anything like that,
no. Emotion.
He did,
no.
I know. Do you enjoy the writing process, or is it different? There's a different pressure from acting. You're acting someone else's lines, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you write it, that's the DNA of it, really. That's when you get to create, all the beats of it and the characters and give them a voice and that. But the way I look at it is that what you've done there, and I think if you're any good as a writer, I'd like to think this is the process. The process I stand by anyway is that when you've done that script, you've basically built the trampoline, and it's up to the actors to come and bouncing it as high as they dare, really. And I use that analogy in sport, and when I used to coach kids rugby and that, and I said, listen, we've built the trampoline. You've got to go and bouncing it as high as you can now, And good actors will just change it into something that really makes it live, and then of course you want to write for them in the next series.
Why do you think those shows like Tuckers and Stella have been so successful? Why? Real life, close to real life, you think?
I think that there's a recognition in the characters, and that's universal, that is. And if you recognise, then you empathise, and you're going to laugh with them, you're going to cry with them. I mean, I remember the Tuckers was very popular in a lot of working class areas in Nottingham and Southampton.
Because they see someone who is that character.
Yeah. Oh, if people say to me, "Oh, I've never met the Tuckers," I say, "Well, it's you then."
Yeah.
Because if you haven't met them, it's you.
Yeah.
Right, as simple as that.
Yeah, exactly. Because we all know someone who's like
we all know them, yeah.
So what's the proudest thing you've been involved in? You think you've written or?
Well, I suppose that to get your own show away was incredible. To be commissioned on my own, I mean, it was I wrote 19 episodes of the Tuckers on my own, and it's hard work, that is. But I was incredibly proud of that because of the fact that it started, in an idea in my head, based not too loosely on my real family as well. I did have a Grandpa Murphy that would not come in from the outside toilet.
You can't come on the show without talking about your mega movies you've been involved in, right? So Star Wars, Phantom Menace. What was that? It's like Star Wars franchise is just huge. I'd argue maybe the biggest franchise. Maybe
I think it is actually. I didn't see any of it, mind you. George Lucas, one tight man. I tell you that. It was really weird that I was going through a divorce at the time. It was all against green screen. Not my divorce. The show.
Was it?
Oh, it was mad. Yeah, it was. I played Captain Tarples, who's the Gungan leader of Jar Jar Binks. You said in a big doo-doo, Jar Jar. He spoke like that. And I remember I had a thing made with a thing in my voice. You used to pull the thing, and it was in the toy came out afterwards, and in the box. And I said to the kids, don't open these ever. I said they'd be worth a lot of money when I'm dead. I said, because it'd be my voice and all the rest of it.
All those
fanatics. And it was great.
All
the fanatics. I mean, you go and sign things and they want the stuff that's in boxes. And you said a big doo-doo, Jar Jar. I thought, that'll be all right. Anyway, my older kids had grown up, and then younger ones came along, and my little girl was about 2 years, and she said, I've been playing with that funny man in the drawer. And I said, what do you want about? Oh, don't. A bit weird. So I went in. She's got the box. And I come in and it goes, you seem big. He'd been there like this. The whole thing.
He wasn't
all the
asthmatic,
box-
was he?
Yeah, he was. He was. I can hear him now.
Right, and then again, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh yeah.
Johnny Depp, but that wasn't on green screen, was it?
No, that was we were out in a boat, which is horrific because I get terribly seasick.
I saw that on Fourth Call.
Oh, I can't cope with it. Oh, mate. And I made the schoolboy error of not looking at the schedule when we were filming Porthcawl. And it was our last night there. We were staying in the caravans in Treco, and everybody was on the gin, and we were all having a drink. 2 o'clock in the morning, I thought, we've got away with this. What a lovely shoot. Where are we tomorrow? You're on the lifeboat at 6. Oh, you are joking me. I tell you what, I would really...
I don't know. I had one of them once. I was supposed to do something for a TV show. So I went out with a couple of guys first, on his 60th birthday. As I knew his dad was retiring or something. And I found out he was, when David Bowie was on concert in America, he was in the warm-up group. So
really?
He's asking me a couple of questions. I was like, and I was asking him questions about everything.
Yeah.
So time got away with us, a couple of pints, right? I forgot. Next day I was jumping out of a plane. I shit myself. I was going. And the bloke said to me, right, listen, I've been messing about all day. He said, hey, listen, mate, if you don't concentrate here, you could die. That did focus my mind, let me tell you, right?
Yeah, the thing is, it's always the next day. It's always, we don't ever do that. And the next day they go, we get excited, we do.
So talk us through Pirates of the Caribbean, Johnny Depp and all that.
Johnny Depp, incredible. I mean, I've never been involved in anything because Star Wars was so technical and against green screen. I mean, this was all action out on that big boat. I mean, there was...
Where was it filmed?
We shot in St. Vincent and Bequia, and we were in the proper Caribbean. I mean, by the end films, they were doing in Cornwall and things, I think Pirates of the Caribbean 10, they're doing in Fontagary.
Be cheap anyway, budgets.
Cheaper, really,
Budgets are cut. So
we were out there, right? And I mean, I'd never come across anything on, Jeff, on the scale of this. That I mean, first of all, he's just enormous star, and the whole thing around it. I was in the second film, so by this point, it was a huge success. It was the first time I went into Virgin to fly over to America. It was the first time I'd ever turned left into a plane, and it was all of that stuff of. And they kept bringing me in and asking me if I wanted food, and I kept saying no because I thought this is going to cost a bomb.
I know.
And eventually they said, "You do know this is free." I said, "Why didn't you say get it over here?" That's why I spent the whole flight just eating and getting drunk, quite frankly. But it was. But when I got there, the scale of it was enormous. They had a big kraken. It was like a big octopus, which kills us, takes the boat down. And anyway, they built so they could refilm it. The boat would cut in half, then it'd come back up. They built like a big sort of like trench for this thing to be in with a big arm and these crowbar. It was just so difficult. And we were out in the sea and we shot. And in the scene I die, in the scene in which I die, that scene we shot for 3 weeks. There were 28 stuntmen. There were 60 extras. There was about 9 cameramen, 3 that could fly on wires. There were gallons of water. There was this great big giant rubber octopus. There was blood being chucked all over us. 3.5 weeks. And on screen, it lasts for 92 seconds.
I know, it's mad, isn't it?
I died in 92 seconds.
Oh, seriously, don't it?
And it took us 3.5 weeks to shoot it. It's mad.
You must have had some, like that sounds a surreal moment doing all that, but you must have had some amazing surreal moments.
Yeah, it is. I sort of go, I sort of pinch back. It's really interesting with me, actually, because I meet other actors and I sort of know what it's about and I know what we do and I don't get massively starstruck. But I remember when a mate of mine did the show Stomp, which is in the West End.
Oh yeah, that's the Australian shoes, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's like that. It's all the banging of things.
Yeah.
And the Australians.
Clocks or something, I didn't know.
Yes, it is. No, I know what you mean though. Anyway, it was in the West End, and they said, "Oh, we got the All Blacks coming in this afternoon to watch matinee, and they're over for the." I said, "Oh, I'd love to come that." And I remember meeting the boy and having a photo with Richie McCaw, you know. I got my hand in his shoulder and I'm suddenly shaking, like you see, you know, Star Wars fans when they come up to me and they're all in a state because of that. So I suppose we've all got our own heroes, and mine happened to not be, like, you're a hero of mine, and you know that. You are.
Thank you.
And but they happen to be not in my game.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? Yeah, I'm the same.
Do you have any?
Yeah, definitely. I'm totally. I'll bump into anyone, Dan Carter and Martin Johnson.
Yeah,
we're all kind of. And then you like, and I'll see someone. I met Donald Sutherland.
Oh, you met Donald Sutherland
in a lift.
Yeah.
And honest God, it was like I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Striking guy, like, you know, white hair, blue eyes.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, but hey, we've been lucky. We've seen a lot of the world, seen a lot of nice people, and we've enjoyed what we do.
It is, and when I think about it, you know, when I look back at, you know, that audition I had when my eyes were broken out with cat's allergy, and my puffed up, my inhaler, and I think, you know, actually I'm glad I stuck with it, because I think it's tenacity you need in this game more than anything. And I've literally travelled everywhere because of the game, really, because of my business. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So now, before we finish, you're writing on something again now.
Yeah.
Tell us what you can tell us, really.
Well, it's great. It's with
Ruth?
Yes, it's with Ruthie. Yeah, I'm really excited. So in fact, this came about very organically. I don't like using that word, but it did. It happened in a sort of weird way. We had done the Merthyr show, and we were in the edit watching it, and I said, Jesus, I said, look at us hobbling here. No. Ruth had a bad knee, and I'd had the operation on my knee, and I'd had a bad fall, and they put me back together. And I said, geez, I said, like, we're hobbling up and down there. And we just started laughing about it. We said, oh, look at us in this shot. We're just laughing at two people who were in pain with their knees. And so I started telling Ruth stories about what happened in the pre-op clinic and all the rest of it. And then she said, you know, we need to write something about this. And this idea that was born, we just started laughing in the night and chucking ideas about these two characters, which I won't go into too much. But basically the premise is that you have two people who are in pain and need new knees, and that's the only reason they meet.
That's relatable, right? Because I had a knee replacement, right?
Yeah.
And the first 2 weeks I tell people, like, that's all it is morphine and laxatives. And all the best, mate. That's all it is, right? But everything's funny. There's so many people being there now.
No, yeah. And also that you know, all they've got really is each other, and it's a growing of a very unlikely friendship which develops, and you know, we're in the midst of writing it now, and I tell you what, Jeff, it's lovely, because we're very disciplined in the way, and we don't live in the same place, right? Ruth's in London, I'm in Cardiff, so we get together for days to map out the episode and what they call a scene by scene, and then we go away. Then I'll write a draft and Ruth will write a draft, then we give it to the producer and he'll give us some notes and we write another draft. And then we'll give it to and you know, you end up 5 or 6 drafts in with a very tight piece of work. And I love it. I absolutely love this process. And then when I'm loving it, I think, oh, I can't wait to act. And when I'm acting, I'm going, I can't wait to write.
How many programmes would that be then?
We'll do 6. We'll do like a sitcom. Yes, it's a BBC One network commission, and we're thrilled, because it's a lovely idea. And we haven't written together since Stella, and that was, you know, what now?
I look forward to that.
12, yeah, I think you'd like it.
Quick fire round now, right? See? Quick fire.
I got to be on the game now.
If you could appear in any film franchise, well, you've been on the biggest one. What would it be?
Born Supremacy.
Would it?
Yeah. I fancy myself.
I can see that. You could. Well, they're looking for a new James Bond.
I think. Oh.
Yeah, I think it's you. Right. Last thing you bought online.
A meal for 2.
On your own.
It was a present. I would say yes, for me it is. I haven't asked you yet.
Best advice.
Hang on, Jeff. And here it is.
Best advice you've ever been given.
My father said to me, you don't look good, you haven't got any money, make sure you always smell nice.
Very good. Wear clean pants, yeah. That's the one. Right, I know the answer to this. Ever been starstruck?
Oh yeah, well, Richard McCaw.
Biggest pet hate or thing that irritates you the most?
People leaving about 20 yards at an ATM. It's passive-aggressive queuing. I can't cope with it. I feel like grabbing him and saying, get to the machine and crack on, or I'm going to walk straight in front of you.
Right.
Oh, no, hang on. No, there's a gap here. It's my gap. It's not your gap.
Get on with it.
They said, get on with it. Get your money and piss off.
Worst nickname you've been given?
Big man. I can't stop being called Big Man. Big cock would be fine, but Big Man.
Who would play you in a biopic?
I've already asked him and he has said yes. Johnny Depp.
Lovely, perfect.
He's got a few pies to eat, but he said he'd work on it.
If you had to give up one, rugby or acting, what would you choose?
Oh, God. Well, I don't play rugby, so I couldn't give up acting because I got too many kids. And I got the CSA up my arse as well, so I mean, it's a nightmare, isn't it?
So rugby's down the bin. Steve?
Is that, hang on, when you say rugby's down the bin, is that a general comment at the moment? We haven't got enough time, have we? No.
Stephen, absolute pleasure as ever. Diolch yn fawr, boy. Brilliant.
Cheers.